Well, thank you very much. It's great to be with you all today. I was talking to Teresa prior to the meeting. It's 4 o'clock in the morning here, which is just the opposite for you. I'm just starting my day and wide awake. It's also minus 6 degrees Celsius here today, which is unusual. So we're off to a bit of a cold start. When I was first approached about doing this project, you know, it took me a long time to kind of catch up to. So how would I approach this? How would I approach this? So what I've done is I put together a few slides here that introduce myself, and the way I want to approach this is as if you're starting from scratch. You know, you don't have a plant, and you're trying to design one and how you would do it for the crops that you're looking at. Because I have no idea of, you know, your what you have now. So I think it's the best way to go. I'll tell you this, I think that seed processing in and of itself, seed processing is very difficult. It takes a lot of passion. I mean, you want somebody cleaning the seed who has a passion to do it. It's a live organism. It doesn't seem like a live organism. It's not like you're walking to a field of wheat and you go, oh, that plant's dead, that plant's dead. You pick up a handful of seed, they all lay there as if they're dead. So it's so easy to forget that you're dealing with that, and yet you have to treat it like it's a live organism. The other thing I would say to you is it takes a lot of creativity. It's not so easy to do this. We're always short funds. We never have the money. We always want something else, but yet we have to figure out a way to get our jobs done. These are the, in green, you'll see the areas in which I either manage the seed plant or I manage the seed production. So obviously you can see that it was a bit of Western United States, Australia, and I spent a lot of time in Europe. Mostly over there, I was touring seed plants. Part of my career, I worked for KWS. So, and they grow seed in a lot of different areas of Europe. On the right, I put down a list of the seed crops that I have personally cleaned. So I don't come to this as if I sat in a desk all of my life and have never had hands-on experience. And you can see it's quite a diverse lot. We live in I should tell you that I live in Oregon, which I hope you can see where I'm pointing here. There's a very small valley here, and we produce 120 different types of crops. So it gives us a wide variety of experiences here. And so some of these you wouldn't probably recognize. When I was in California, I did some work in California. We were actually cleaning spices and peppermint leaves like that. So I have a real diverse background in all of this. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, there we go. So as far as seed equipment goes, on the left it is the seed equipment. I listed not all the seed equipment that's available, of course, but this is the machines that I've either installed or ran. Again, because I was on the floor running a lot of equipment for a big part of my career, I have operated a lot of different types of machines, and also having designed and built and you might say even invented a few specialized pieces of equipment. And at one time I had equipment that I had designed in 4 different countries. The one thing I want to get through, and again, we're starting from scratch here, some of the goals, concepts that I think a seed manager is going to want to have. And the first is, you know, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. This is an old saying, of course, we've probably all heard it. But when people walk into your seed plant, no, even if you don't have the money, which again, we never always had the money. And I have worked in plants with wooden floors and so on. but it's always a big job to keep these places clean. It's a constant job. But I think it's really speaks to who you are. And I think it really, when plant breeders go through your facilities, for example, if they're nice and clean and organized, it really gives them a good feel about, well, I feel good about how my perennial lines are being treated, because I think in your case, really, the plant breeders are actually your customers, and we always want to keep our customers happy. The third is solution to pollution is dilution. You know, this is kind of a bit of a joke in the seed industry, and one that I certainly would have adhered to. If you're cleaning a seed lot and it's 5-6 ton and you get a couple of kilos of something in there that doesn't belong, that's fine. Probably no one's going to see it, and so no one makes a big deal about it. But you're working with stage seed, and I would say to you that you can never have any contamination. That really needs to be your goal. We're not going to have contamination in our seed, and it comes from all kinds of places. So I would encourage you to test and test, do grow outs. I believe you discussed plots already when I looked through your agenda. Find out where it's coming from if you're getting some. You know, there's great technology now to do markers and really help you with what you're in doing your job. Use it or lose it. This is a big problem with seed plants that I've been through. I don't think there's been one that I've gone through that, except for the farmer-owned ones in Iowa, where this is not an issue. If you're on a farm-operated one, chances are they tell the seed companies, "You're taking the seed. We're not storing this stuff. It's yours." When I was in Australia, we had some companies that were growing basic seed for us, and it was the same thing. We're not storing. And if you've ever done any seed storage, you know why. It's not easy. It just invites all kinds of problems, and it's a big job. Getting somebody to make the decision to get rid of seed that has no value has always been a problem. But you just have to push and push and find a way to get it done. And if the seed is treated, especially here in the States, that I can speak to, it's very difficult because nobody wants it, and it's an environmental problem. What the government really wants us to do is to plant it and use it as forage, do something, but they don't want it in the landfills, and you certainly can't throw it in the garbage can. 8 and 108. If you're going to dry seed, always remember that your seed can never get over 42 degrees. This is a live organism. And you can only take moisture out of seed at a slower rate. You just can't pour the heat to it. As water comes out of seed, it will destroy, you'll heat it, and that heat will destroy the cells of the seed. And again, you can't see it, but test. I would highly recommend that if I was setting up a plant and I was drying seed, I would test to make sure that I'm not doing any damage. And so I would be doing grow outs. I would be doing stress tests in fields. And you have a lot of, within this organization, I see that you have a lot of scientists, and I would use the scientists because they can really help you set up your plots. They can tell you how many numbers you have to plant to get reliable results. So use them. And then we get to technology. Now, technology means a lot of different things. But I use it, I say that you can use technology as a fingerprint in your seed plant. And by fingerprint, what I mean is if you do enough tests on your seed, you can begin to see a fingerprint, if you will, and you can predict things about that seed. For example, if you have seed lot and the germination starts to fall a little bit, that may tell you that, hey, this thing is going to fall. It's going to keep falling, and we better either use this seed because if we don't, it's not going to be any good anymore. So there are a lot of data people now who are invaluable. When I first started doing barcoding in the mid-90s, A barcode reader costs $2,500, and it just went on from there. We were putting in these systems within the plant, and we were $200,000 just to keep so that we would not contaminate lots. We barcoded everything. We made sure that the machine said it was okay to put it in. But in today's world, instead of paying $2,500, you can buy a barcode reader for $25. And there's all kinds of data systems out there. And I would highly recommend that, if you could, to cooperate, have one data person someplace. The cloud has really changed the world. Put these things on the cloud and use that data. It's fantastic. Every company loves their acronyms, as you know. And from my side, I always found them to be a bit annoying. However, there is one, subject matter expert, a SME. And I really like that one. And I would highly recommend to you that you would train your employees to be SMEs in the work that they're doing. You really want somebody to know, for example, your storage, how to store, what the temperature should be, why they should be there. And each crop's probably different, but eventually somebody will know all of that stuff. And if it's possible to share this information amongst your group, I would do that. Make them accountable. But I highly recommend that setting up a seed plant, that's how you would organize your people. And you'll find that the people, for the most part, respond quite well. People really enjoy being an expert in something. I want to move over into seed processing equipment. Like I told you, I'm trying to cover a lot of ground in a very short period of time here. This could be a seminar, so here we go. This is an example. I wanted to give you an example of not having any money and yet solving a problem. My CEO came to me some years ago, and he said, we got to add some powder to the seed and make it smoother so it plants better. Our competitors are doing it. We're not doing it. We're getting beat up by the sales department to get this done. Well, at that time, the company I was working for was half owned by Northrop King and half owned by KWS. They didn't like each other, and Northrop King wasn't going to give us any money. And KWS wasn't going to give us any money because they didn't want the money to go over to Northrop King, and it was a mess, and we were stuck in the middle of this thing. So, you do what you have to do. So we went out and we got some of these culverts that normally go underneath of a road, and we got some used tires, and we were able to make these things spin. We threw the seed in, and we did buy a powder feeder to apply powder. And then we used a paint sprayer to paint it all on, and a dryer at the end to dry it back down. And it worked out quite well. And we did that for a few years until everybody made up, and then we were able to replace that with better equipment. I really believe that as far as seed processing, here's where it begins. It doesn't necessarily begin in your plant. It begins out in the field, because junk in is junk in. You can't do anything with it. So I understand that you're getting some wonderful pieces of equipment. And I'm sure that the salesman has told you that they're 100% clean out. But I would be very skeptical. I would test and test and test and make sure that they are 100% clean out. I have found with these machines that there's always a spot where it isn't quite 100%. And I don't know how much you would change from one material to another, but always be careful, be cognizant. And before as seed came into my seed plant, I would always grab a sample. I would always put it in a grow out. And if possible, I would get a DNA test on it to make sure that it was pure. Air screen separator, I'm just, like I said, I'm just hitting some of the big ones. Every plant's got an air screen separator in it. These are guaranteed. If they look anything like what's on this screen on the bottom, I guarantee you can't clean them out. And I know people say, swear up and down they can clean them out. So clean one out, put some treated seed in it, run that, and see if you have untreated seed in your treated seed. If you don't, you're getting it clean. If you do, then welcome to the rest of the world. What I've gone with is the more of a flat screen, especially if I'm doing the seed types. If the pre-basic seed, you have small amounts anyway. What's the big deal? You lay one screen down and you run it over. Maybe it takes a couple of these. They're rather inexpensive pieces of equipment. But it's a good way to avoid a lot of the problems that you have with these bigger machines. And always remember too, that when you're looking at pricing, the price of the machine is normally half of the total cost of installing. So you've got elevators and not augers, you got elevators and electricity and all that to consider with these machines, and it really starts to add up, as you probably well know. Gravity tables. Now, gravity tables are probably the heart and soul of most plants. Unfortunately, they size by shape and then by size and finally by density. So they're not the world's most perfect machine, but they're better than anything else that's out there. There are a lot of small lap models, and you probably have one. You found that they're difficult to operate and get a good separation on. There are better ones, and I don't know how many companies make and sell these now, and they're all the best, I know, if you read the literature, but you have to find one that really works for what the crop that you're doing. It's not an easy machine to operate. They're affected by so many things, like I just said. Even the pressure of the air will affect them. So if there's a big storm moving in, for example, your gravity table will change if you're not watching. This is what not to do, and this is why you want your SME to know how to run a gravity table. You'll see up at the top where the heavy seed is. See how it's boiling like crazy right here, and there's no air. This table, you could not set a table more incorrectly than what this table is set. And you can see that here's the lights over here. The way a gravity table works is that the heavy seed pushes the light seed down. If there wasn't any heavy seed, this light seed would come all the way over here to the top. I don't know if you've ever seen spirals work, but I wanted to show you these. They're very inexpensive, and what they do is they really separate the rounds from the flats. So your round seeds will fly out and get caught in the outer rim. And then all these before and afters, the first one is the good seed, and then they show you, oh, sorry, I guess I was wrong. So anyway, they're a really good seed machine if you've never used one before. Indent barrels. Okay, so here is rule number 1 in setting up a seed plant. You see this auger in here? Please, please, please do not use augers in seed plants. I know everybody says you clean these machines, you can't clean them. And number 2, in my career working at KWS, we had 2 employees who were very, very badly injured, nearly lost their arms getting caught up in augers. Both of them happened in the field, not in a plant. I really hate augers, I'm telling you. I know that they're a necessary evil in certain industries, but they don't belong in your seed plant. Seed treatment equipment. Gustavo had told me that you don't really do a lot of seed treatments maybe, and this isn't something that I'm going to spend a lot of time on. However, I did want to run something past you. Again, just showing you the importance of somebody knowing how things in the world work, why you want an expert in each area of operation. So if you're applying a fungicide to seed, in the old days, we used to use what's called a double dip seed treater, where you just basically dump a bunch of treatment into a tub and let the wheat whirl around and let it share the colorant and the fungicides, because it didn't have to be perfect. If it's in a fungicide, the way they work is that they create organisms on the outside of the seed in the soil, and that protects the seed. And by the way, if you were to plant seed and then let it set in just a little bit of a moisture for a while, what's going to happen is these organisms are going to grow and die before you apply the irrigation to it. So they may be gone before you start. So if you're getting Pythium, for example, you'll know the reason why. Insecticides are different. Insecticides, are being taken in by the plant, and they may be in there the entire life cycle of the plant, and they protect usually against these biting or sucking insects. And those have to be applied very carefully, and you want to make sure that each seed gets its share, and you can't just pour it on and let them share it. This is not going to work. And there are, I can't even imagine how many different possibilities there are in today's world to apply insecticide. But if you ever need something like that, I can obviously help you more. Seed drying. So now we're getting into some very, very critical operations here. I've been asked so many times over the years, how much air does it take to dry seed? And the answer is, you want to be able to blow your hat off. In other words, always have plenty of air. This is a corn dryer that is maybe in Teresa's part of the world here. And you can see from the fans, they're just massive fans on here to dry this seed. The idea is, especially in these high humidity areas, to use plenty of air. And this is something we'll cover again. At the end of my career at KWS, we actually were using these machines on the bottom where you would actually blow the air through the seed at the same time you were applying the chemicals or the powder. And so that's absolute drying, where the seed was in the air at all times. It's hard for people not to increase the heat. When I was at Syngenta, they had purchased a dryer that was used for cornflakes to dry seed. Okay, so if I'm drying cornflakes, I don't want the flakes to dry in the air, or fly into the air, so I'm going to keep the amount of air down, just the opposite of what you want when you're doing seed. And the second thing is, who cares about the heat? As long as you're not burning the flakes, turn the heat up. And you can see here in your drying temperatures, if you're drying at 40 degrees C, I don't know what these, all I can tell you is you can look at the numbers and see how much difference there is in the amount of moisture that the air can carry. At 60 degrees, it'll carry 3 times as much as it does at 40. So what happens is, we got to get out of there. We got to get home. We got to get this dry. Let's crank this up. Let's go. Or we got a lot of pressure to do a whole bunch of seed lots. Just turn it up a little bit. Again, it's a living organism, and you can't see that you killed it until it's too late. So when I say never use heat higher than 42, you're going to hear from people that are going to say, that's not true. That is not true. You can use more heat than that. And the answer is yes, you can. Probably not in your situation because yours are so small, your seed lots. But just like when we were all kids and we'd jump in the swimming pool on a hot day, and then when we got out, we were just shivering. We would shake. We were so cold. So water is a coolant, and it works the same way in seed. So if you're getting, if those big tanks that you saw in the previous slide, and the seed was very wet, they're probably using more heat than that. But they are very, very careful in measuring the temperature of that seed, never allowing that seed to ever get over probably 106 would be the highest that they would ever allow it. And again, you know, I showed you some really fancy equipment, but many of the farms that I have visited in the Midwest, they're just tanks. They may be an old seed tank that's been there for 30, 40 years. And they're still blowing air through them to dry their corn. And they work quite well, very well. They certainly don't need to spend millions of dollars to make improvements. So this is a chart that I always found very helpful. We used to prime a lot of seed. I don't know if you've heard that terminology, but you would prime seed by adding water to it. The idea is to get rid of these enzymes that are on the seed that prevent it from germinating. In the case of wheat, you would never prime wheat because wheat does not have any inhibitors on it by the time it's harvested. If you've ever seen a ripe field of wheat come out of a rainstorm, and you might see sprouting by the time that dries down so you can harvest it. Or the receiving station won't take it because you've already started the sprouting. But there are a lot of seeds that you can put the moisture in and dry down. And I'm not proposing that you do that. I just wanted you to be aware that when the seed imbibes the water at a certain point, the nutrients are going to start being digested as the sprouting begins, but you don't see it. This is all taking place inside. So the center between those two arrowed lines is the danger zone. If you've got seed that was brought in and maybe it's, I don't know your situation, but let's say it's 15%, 16% moisture, and you say, well, we'll dry that. When we come back next week, we'll get on that. And what you don't realize is that that seed has got enough water that it is getting between those two arrows. It's beyond the point that you can save it now. And yet it doesn't have enough water that it's going to actually sprout. Oftentimes in fields, people will plant seed and they'll have more moisture in that seed than in that field than they realize. They are in that middle zone, and by the time they get the irrigation on it 2 weeks later, the seed doesn't sprout. And they're like, and of course, who do they come back to? Seed processing, and say, what's wrong with your seed? And the fact is that the seed has already started to sprout and died. Seed storage. And I suppose that this would be a big one for you. I told you that we had 120 different crops here in the valley. And some years ago, there was a market that developed for this area in Brazil, where we can grow here in the valley some cool weather vegetables, broccoli and so on, and get the seed and then sell it down in Brazil. Well, when they first started doing it, they'd ship the seed down and the phone would ring and say, there's no germination in your seed. It's dead. And yet here in Oregon, they would test it and retest it. It's fine. So what's going on? Well, what they discovered is that they weren't drying the seed down dry enough. And by the time they shipped it down in these open containers, you know, just in sacks or small bags and so on, that was enough that it would go between the two arrows on the previous slide. So what they discovered is that, and of course, when it got to Brazil, it didn't go into a cooler. It went out to the field and maybe it sat on the guy's pickup for a week or 2 weeks, whatever. But then what they discovered is that if they dried the seed down to 4 to 6% moisture and then put it in a sealed container, that the seed would last for years. And it didn't necessarily have to be in cool storage. Now, having said that, the sun is not your friend, and I know you have a tremendous amount of sun there. You cannot leave seed sitting out in the sun, but it will just get too hot. But it's something to consider, I would say, for you. And never put seed in glass or plastic. you know, because you get that nursery effect, the same as you get when you're sitting in your car with the window shut, heat. So I wanted to, I wanted to talk a little bit about all of this in terms of how to organize yourselves. We all know that seed production and seed processing are two totally different entities, and we probably have different people doing them. Obviously, they have to hand off back and forth to each other, and they work together. But I would say that storage and data are separate entities as well. When it comes to long-term storage, you would not, even in the biggest warehouses, the KWSs of the world or Syngentas, the storage really goes to a different department. It's outside of what the seed processors do. And I'm talking long-term storage now. I don't know why, but I struggle with it myself. I think as seed processors, we're really not very good at long-term storage for whatever reason. And data. Today's world, with the cloud, somebody sitting in Mexico or anywhere in the world can be receiving your data for you and giving you access, easy access to it, so that you can see all of your germinations, you can see your grow out results, you can see your DNA testing, your marker testing, sorry. So I would consider doing it that way. I mean, I don't know your situation, but that's how I would set one up in today's world. And this is especially true in the last, say, 6 to 8 years, where things have changed so dramatically. Okay, so that's, do you want me to, Gustavo, to show the planter now, or would you, how would you
I think that would be better maybe to open for questions, have discussion on seed processing first.
Okay.
And after that, if you could present the planters, I think that would be useful.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like to kickstart the questions, Bruce, here, because you mentioned a couple of things. One of them is never put seeds in glass or plastic containers.
Yeah.
And because we have that nursery effect. So I'm assuming you mean in under room temperatures, or is that the same condition for cold storage as well?
No, you are correct. Anything that goes outside into the sun cannot be in. I would never put in plastic or glass. It's just gonna get too hot too fast.
Okay. The second question, and the most, I guess it's quite important, that you mentioned that we need to have subject matter experts. So in your experience, how would you see that handled in a manageable way in such institutions where we have diverse reading programs?
So, well, let me just use the experiences that I've had is that even on the plant floor, and I know I use the term subject matter expert probably very loosely here, but we would do something like add coatings to the seed and then dry it. Well, we had one person who was involved with that, and that one person then would be on phone calls or whatever with others from other programs, and together they would keep themselves educated on what they're seeing, how best to improve. And that person then was the one you could go to and say, well, what about this? And they might come back to you, for example, and say, well, you know, here we have some corn seed, we're adding some powder to it. We're trying to make it so that they're more the same size, and we don't have to screw around with all these different sizes, but you can't do it on this size, or this one is too smooth, or whatever. So they become the experts so that you don't have to try and be an expert in all of this. And then they coordinate with, or they're on the phone with, or have meetings with other people in the organization that do the same thing. Is that helpful or?
Yeah, I guess what you're saying is at one stage, let's say we need to get an expert for, let's say, for about seed cleaning, for example, or for seed treatment. Okay,
Yes.
if you have a subject, well, or for that matter, a process expert on that, they can manage different seeds. Okay, but within decentralized or within the same farm unit.
Right. Yes, correct. Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, here I would actually like to get some feedback from our audience, from the participants. How do you think that this could be possible, or if you think that such an idea would be quite applicable within our setup here, for example, either at EiB-IITA or at CRI or SARI, or even for Africa Rice for that matter. Anyone would like to share?
Okay, thanks, Peter, for the good presentation. I just wanted to check with you. There is maybe one of your slides where it's written seed production, processing, storage, and data are all uniquely different departments in manufacturing, and they are all tied together by the use of work orders. So what I wanted to check with you, when you are referring to work orders, are you also incorporating the issue of management softwares, the different requirements that are required by each department? What really are you referring to in terms of work orders?
So I would, yeah, depending upon how you want to keep the data, I really would have all the data stored on one database, and then you have access. You really should be all recording information in the same way. And what I mean by that is, if you set up a lot number, the tendency with a lot number is we're going to put intelligence in our lot number. So, you know, you might, oh, that's the year, that's the crop, that's the treatment that's on it, and it just goes on and on and on. And you try to force feed all of that into a lot number. And one of the most difficult decisions that I've always found within the organizations to make is to say, get away from that and go to a system where a lot number is a dumb number. It's just the next number in line. Doesn't matter what the crop is, doesn't matter what facility is using it, nothing, just it's the next number. When we first began setting up databases, not to give, I mean, how do I say this? At first, when we first started doing this, we really only had something like Excel. That was our best bet in those days. But these things have come so far now, these databases. And we could only have one or two characteristics associated with a lot number. So for example, we could say, well, this is the seed treatment, and we would make that a characteristic of a lot number. And we would get one, maybe two of those. Well, nowadays you can have hundreds, thousands. It doesn't make any difference how many you have. Just whatever you want to report on. I don't know if you use some of these financial databases that you can get off the internet for $10 or $15 a month, but it's sort of the same idea where you have all this data out there and you plug in your own data and you use your own data, but they act as the data storage for you. And I really think that that's the type of system that you would want to put in, because you can't at each an individual site become experts in setting up databases and so on. That's a bit much, I would say. Did I answer your question or not?
Yeah, I think you did quite a lot. But what I wanted to add on to that is, you know, like EiB-IITA here, besides having different crops, we also look at within a crop, there might be other projects. that are there. Can these be accommodated in such softwares, or it's a bit of now just bulking everything and allocating probably codes around that?
So I think to answer that question, the best, so this is one of those things that is how you set these up should be set up according to the way that you want to use it, what best suits suits people. And whether some people use part of it or all of it wouldn't really matter. I would suggest that that some of this becomes an open discussion somewhere. This could easily be a day-long seminar, by the way. For example, if I was a plant breeder and I was walking through a field, I would want to know, say, where did this line come from? What's its history? Or, what issues did the people in the seed processing plant find with this? Did they have contamination? What are the, what were the grow outs? What were the marker results? And in today's world, there is no reason why the plant breeder couldn't barcode the tag at the end of the row and get the information that they want in the format that they want. This was not possible even just a few years ago, but it's certainly possible now. And I really think that this is an area that you would want to spend some serious time looking at.
Okay, Bruce, I have a question here because we want to also kickstart the discussion on how we should manage the workspace. Okay, so far from what we are seeing, okay, we do have equipment around. Sometimes it's not in the most adequate condition. Sometimes it's in a bad condition. Sometimes they are not safe, or the end result is not so good. Okay, but suppose we have a best case scenario where we have adequate equipment and okay, where everything is functioning right. How do we work out, or how do we plan our workstations? This is going to be a prequel to what we are going to discuss later, is what challenges we are facing here at the different centers regarding seed processing and how we can make it or develop it to be more efficient.
So this again is a really good topic for a discussion, and would probably take, I could easily see this being a major discussion as well, but it's an excellent question. Part of what you'll eventually are going to have to do is you're going to have to start creating what's called work orders, because I'm guessing right now you're not using work orders throughout your companies. Every manufacturing plant, and every one of them, uses a work order to accomplish a task. And you really have work orders that would start in the field. You're taking two products, you're planting them, and you're creating a third. So you're creating something new. So a work order tracks that for you. Now, when you may look at a seed lot and say, this is our plan of attack. We're first going to do this, then this, then this, then this, then this. And then someone's going to say, yeah, but what about this? The nice thing about work orders are that this is what you want to do, but you can change work orders. They're very malleable. And so you would say, you know what? I've only got 500 grams of seed here. I'm not going to run this on the gravity table, even though it's on the work order. I'm going to bypass that. And that's fine. But it gives instructions to everybody about how we want to process the seed. Does that help? Or I'm not sure I'm answering your question.
Well, it does actually help in a way, but suppose, let's say a single case scenario, for example. Let's say we have, for the sake of argument, we have soybeans. So we receive the seeds, okay, from the seed accession unit from the fields, and we want to start our process, okay, start our work, okay. So is there a way to make our job more efficient How can we organize our workstations in a manner which
Oh,
is
right.
efficient? It will help with the flow of work. Oh, Gustavo, you want to comment there?
No, please continue. Go ahead, Bruce.
Yeah, so, right, I mean, it's very normal in a seed plant that, you know, that you would have certain machines in succession to each other, and I think everyone would probably put the air aspiration first, and then from there, they would go into a size separator of some type, because I can imagine that soybeans probably come in with maybe stems or wild oats or something in them. But you face a unique situation in my mind, because you're dealing with very small quantities. So I would think that, you know, a bit of what you're doing is, in my mind, you have a circle of equipment and you're going to the right equipment within that circle to do the next step. You don't want to run seed over when you have seed in a row, in a line, and this one feeds that one, and it doesn't really matter, it's going to go through there. One of the negatives you run into is we're running seed through a piece of equipment for no reason. This seed doesn't really need it. And because you have such small quantities, and you really can't use elevators in I don't know how you're going to move seed from one to another. I don't know enough about the business, but you can't use elevators because you can't really clean them out. So yeah, I guess I'm at such a disadvantage. I'd have to have more information to be able to really help you there. I'm sorry.
Right. Maybe. Okay. Gustavo, go ahead, and then we'll hear from Jan.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Bruce. I'd like to talk a little bit more about the work orders, because I think that is an important aspect on defining what needs to be done and how to do the work. Because at the end, the work orders, this is a question to you, if I understood correct for what you said, the work orders would be an agreement between the client and the seed processing unit, for instance, on what would be due or need to be done to that specific lot of material. And that too goes to to the question that probably Amir asked, is how that would be paid too, because each work order would define the activities for that and the cost related to that activities. No, is that correct? What I understood?
Well, you're absolutely correct. I mean, you got it. If you would set up work orders before you did anything else, you would answer all the concerns that you're having. The work orders would tell you how to set up the plant. The work orders you can use work orders to allocate, as you correctly stated, your cost, if that's what you want to do. You can allocate clear down to the boxes that you use for storage. They give you track and trace, which you'll find, if you ever use it, you're going to say, how did we ever live without this? But it all comes down to the work order. The work order is number one. That's where everybody in manufacturing starts. So yeah, you're spot on.
Thanks, Bruce.
Yeah, I think I want to basically endorse that. Again, work orders, basically you're defining a process and then you're documenting that. That's what a work order does. And so then when questions come up, when the scientists or whatever ask, oh, what happened to this seed? You have documentation. There is no question. There's no finger pointing or saying, oh, he said this, he did this. it is documented, and that is key. And that is where we want to get to is to have a process that is clearly documented, work orders accomplished this. And that's essential to have a clear overview of, and then you can also start troubleshooting, right? And that is good too. You can look at a process and this work order goes from here to there, and something went wrong. What could go wrong there? Is there something in our process that we've looked over? So very good to again be able to document your processes. Work orders accomplish that. And then for a spatial organization within a seed processing plan, again, we're in a situation that we need agility, and that's why often setting it up, instead of in a straight line, you can set it up in a circle or a U form or whatever works best. But you look at the space, and you always need to have in mind safety and being able to work effectively and cleanliness. As Bruce pointed out, you need to be able to keep your machines clean. And when you're working with small seed lots, you need to be able to, open up the machine. So accessibility to the equipment. You need to ensure that you have accessibility, that you can clean out the equipment, and it can be done safely. And then also, efficiency. If you think, for example, that you take a seed from one piece of equipment to the next piece of equipment, if you put it really spread out a lot, then you could double or triple the number of steps you take in a day, which, when you're doing just a couple seed lots, no big deal. When you do hundreds of seed lots or small seed amounts, that adds up in a day. So think of those things when you organize your workspace. Really, how can it be done most efficiently, and how can you ensure that the workers, the people that work in that space, don't get exhausted by just running from one machine to another, that they have safe work environment. So those are some of the issues that you want to keep in mind in a spatial area.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, there's a lot on the efficiency shifting between stages. And you mentioned an important aspect that we've been tackling all throughout this workshop, which is one of them is the safety. And we have already discussed today, especially on the maintenance. We mentioned the 6S Lean workshop, and we're lucky to have Teresa online with us as well. We were discussing continuous improvement with that. Things have to be safe. The area needs to be clean, needs to be well organized, well sorted, and fit for the purpose of our tasks and our jobs. Alec, yeah, please.
Oh, hi, Bruce. Thanks for that wonderful presentation. I just wanted to sort of seek your advice. Would you recommend having the seed processing in the same or under the same roof as where they are sorting the seed? Because I do see some
Sorting or storage, did you say? I'm sorry.
sorting, like separating, packaging, sorting, things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, right. We would always, we would never have,
Oh, go ahead, Bruce.
yeah, we would never have packaging in the same area as a seed plant operation. We would in the same place as where you're cleaning the seed at. Just, it gets so, packaging is one of those things that takes a lot of intense concentration. And again, talking about work orders, but they're just so completely different. I mean, with contamination, with dirt in the air and people running around, I would definitely have them in different areas if I could. That's what I would do.
Yeah, the reason I asked that question is I think that's the way we are set up, and I think we have to find a way to separate the two operations. Actually, I did take the liberty of inviting the managers from our seed processing facility. So I don't know what would there be, like their opinion, what Bruce has presented here compared to the way we are doing things currently.
In the meantime, can we hear the comment of Teresa? She's waiting online.
Go ahead, Teresa.
Hi, this is Teresa, and I'm very interesting conversation. And Jan, a lot of all of your comments are very pertinent. One thing that I like the work order idea, and if you think of it, that work order is kind of like a process map, and I not only would I do what's required on a work order or the recipe or the process map for processing that seed, but also the physical process map. And if we're trying to centralize operations, and you would want to create process maps, detailed process maps of everything that has to happen to each type of seed, and possibly set up processing areas that can handle the seed types that are most alike. Because as you process map, you'll find out, these, cowpea and soybean have the same similar process that they have to go through in all the same machines possibly, or most of the machines, and then be able to organize your machines and your process around the type of crops that you are actually dealing with. And then how that whole flow, how do things flow into the building and how do they flow out of the building? And, there's just so many aspects to it, but definitely you need the people that are doing the work to help decide and to look at how that process should work, or how they would like it to work.
Right. Teresa, those are excellent comments. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Teresa. Please go ahead.
Thank you. But presently, what we have here in our section, we have a place where we process seeds and another place where we sort. Close by, but not the same place.
Right. Thank you, Bruce, and thank you, Sponsor Amir. I just want to add, according to our training, CI training, motion is an aspect that we have to consider. Motion is a waste, and for efficiency's sake, we need to consider the distance between the processing part and the sorting, the packaging part. And it is one of the areas I would have loved us to address also, because the distance from field to the processing area is enough. In fact, if there's a way we can fix it, I would have loved that. And the distance from the glass house to the processing area is something, it's huge. It's something we need to consider. And if from what I've learned, from what Bruce talked about, here is something that we should consider, not the heat. The more we dry, the more we should reduce the heat from it. So even as of now, I always prefer that we do enough of sun drying than actually using the machine, because numbers of time we are not able to monitor the moisture level of the seeds and the likes. But under sun drying, fresh air now, you can tell that the seeds are not really over dried. I also want to mention that do we want to agree that seed processing should actually be decentralized? Seed processing on its own should be decentralized and stand on its own, because from what I've seen now, there's a lot of work on the seed processing unit. And for example, my units now, we're currently understaffed, and you have a lot of workload of the breeding itself on you. And to Bruce, I want to ask, how do you manage the customers, that is the breeders now, in terms of request, removing inventories from the shelf? It's something that you have to consider, but you might be shocked sometimes after 4 years or 5 years, they come with the list of this particular varieties that you just removed and sometimes the quantities that you have on ground is not enough to supply how to meet up with the requirements. So how do you manage the investors? How do you manage the customers in this aspect? Because we don't have enough space. We need to remove inventories from the shelf, but at the same time, customers will come later on to request for seats. So how do you manage customers? Thank you.
Yeah, so this is a wonderful question. I think it's probably one of the pinch points or the most emotional parts of this job is you always find yourself in this position. And from what I presented, and then we moved on to work orders, which in a lot of ways I was almost afraid to go to, and I'm so glad that we went there. And the same thing holds true with the inventory. If I don't know your business, I don't know anything, but I'll tell you what I would do. Seed processing processes the seed, and when it's in the condition that they want it to be in, it should go into a warehouse and it belongs to the breeders. It's now it's the breeder's seed. That's your customer. And between data and between the breeders, they have all the information. It's their seed. They can do it. They know how much they have. They can do with it whatever they want. And that's, I mean, that's kind of the way we always did it too. We just turn it over to them.
We have some people who disagree a little bit, but we'll have a discussion on that.
So, well, like Bruce said, it's typically for a breeder, it's very emotional, right? All that seed, it's our babies, right? We created these different varieties, and we're also we have a hard time throwing things out. Breeders do, and you know, I'm a breeder. I'm speaking honestly here, and also we're kind of selfish because my seed is important. The other breeder, you know, that's not my business. It's my seed that's important, right? So, and a breeder by himself, I think, is going to rarely sit down and say, okay, I'm going to throw some of my babies out now. So what the best approach for this is to basically, you know, you have that consensus from the breeders, or at least agreement. I don't know if you have that consensus, but really that can be driven by the seed. The people that maintain the seed storage is basically insisting on putting a process in place. In other words, early generation parents, you can keep this much seed, and it is predetermined. So you say we can keep this much seed from early generation parents. You know, now from later generation parents, you can keep that much seed, and you kind of set rules in place that you know are going to be adhered to. Then once it reaches a certain stage, once you know, seeds are determined to be for the next variety release or for the next production of a hybrid or whatever. When it becomes important, then you increase the seed, right? Then you can keep more seed, but it's only for this long. Okay, so everything should have some kind of expiration date, and then it needs to be tested and checked for quality, for germination, etc. So that there is a continuous checking on that inventory. But I think the best approach in the ideal world, you would have an inventory manager, basically somebody who's better not a breeder, and really keeps track of seed lots and calls on the breeder saying, look, you know, this seed has been there for so many years, it's not been used. You know, we can reduce its size, you know, if it's an old parental line or something that used to be important. Look, it's 10 years old. You still have so much seed. You know, we want to reduce it. Okay, yes, no. I mean, don't put some of these things. You know, don't expect the breeder to initiate these decisions. I think it should be driven by ideally, it should be driven by a system that basically puts up warnings. You know, after so many years of not being used, you know, sets up a warning saying, okay, this seed either needs to be thrown out or multiplied, or same with when some of the parental seed is running low, for example. You know, if it runs low, don't expect that the breeder is going to remember that, oh, I've used so much of this line, you know, I probably will be running low. I mean, so The important part is that it's going to be an accurate inventory, and that there be ideally like a seed storage manager that kind of keeps track of things, and that you at least partially automate some of these things, that if seed has not been used in a few years, a little sign comes up or a flag is raised or whatever, so that some of these things are at least regularly revised. Because yeah, you depend on a breeder, it's not going to happen.
The thing is, where do you draw the line? You know, I mean, this is a cold storage eventually. What we have here is not a gene bank. And there's only a limited amount of time. There's seed viability at stake as well. So if you keep it along or prolong the period there, go ahead, Lennon. Sorry.
I think I really want to agree with Jan. You said it exactly. You know, if for example we're talking of crops here, there are multiple crops, and there are a number of breeders involved. What normally works, from my experience, is a seed retention guideline protocol that is agreed upon by everyone. This one, there are no negotiations. Just like what I was referring, it's like babies for breeders. The guy will tell you, I still want the seed, but it's 10 years old, 15 years old. What do you need it for? So in terms of a seed retention guideline, you're basically stating at each and every stage, if it's germplasm development or the filial generation, how many kernels do you want retained in the seed store? How many should be discarded? So that you know all this clutter that is in the storage room is taken out. Even when it comes to evaluation, the evaluation stage, there should be the minimum quantities that are acceptable for the next stage. Whatever is excess of that, it has to be taken out. Otherwise, the breeders will always tell you that the seed is important for me, I'm going to use it. And you check 6-7 years down the line, it's still seated in the same corner, nothing taken out, nothing added. So definitely what Jan is saying, you need a seed retention guideline protocol that is agreed prior to doing anything. Because obviously, if you allow breeders to get involved as well, they're likely to shift the goalposts to suit their needs. So we need to make sure that, you know, when you're putting up that seed retention protocol, obviously it has to be chaired by someone who is independent, who doesn't have any interest in what is happening, but obviously listening to the needs of the breeders.
Thanks a lot. Gustavo, you want to comment?
Yeah, I want to comment, Amir. What both Jan and Lenny said is it's true. We need to, and we comment during this workshop many times, the communication between the breeders and operational team need to be improved. And also, I think the cold storage or the storage is just reflects that, because at the end, what we have, we don't have that in general. Maybe we have some exceptions, but in general, we don't have that centralization that we discussed, and causes lack of accountability. And everything hey, this is the breeders, this is the breeders, and so that also or prevent or jeopardize the process to be more effective, and create the accountability to the team that manage or breeders want trust. Because if we always ask the breeders, and we don't take the leadership to prove that, or to define these and lead that, breeders will, oh, this is my decision, so why should I trust? So and in many centers, what we see is breeders, and we have centers with that breeding just for one crop, that they have multiple cold storage for different breeding programs. So this is the breeding program for this person, or this is the cold storage for this person, this is cold storage for the other person, and so that's not sustainable. No. Anyway, just I really want to emphasize that accountability for the seed processing team to manage the inventory is crucial to
Thanks,
the success.
Gustavo.
Yeah.
the issue of centralization, we've been discussing this throughout the entire workshop, and we're going to see something. Well, we're going to see today that even within equipment, even within the same vicinity or the same facility, okay, they are the so-called under jurisdiction of certain breeding programs. So, yeah, this breeding program can use this equipment, even though Y equipment can work for them and it's better and it's new, etc. No, they cannot utilize it because it belongs to another team or another breeding program, which goes back to the idea that you just mentioned right now, and that we need to try as much as we can. We need to actually support and shout out that we will have to centralize all our work in order for us to become more efficient. We just discussed today about the farm management role. This is the allocation of tasks. This is how we should operate. So we put on these requests. Okay, we put some scheduling. We assign how many machines that we need. We can set different workstations for different breeding programs, or I'm not going to say breeding programs, but at least I'm going to say simultaneously working programs, okay, all together within the same vicinity or workplace. So, Gustavo, you want to comment? Sorry, go ahead. Let me give you the mic.
Thank you. Sorry, I just want to comment briefly on what you said earlier on the seed retention guideline protocol. I mentioned something. Do we agree that the seed processing should be decentralized, standing on its own? Because, for example, now you need to mention it that in EiB-IITA, for example, the breeders are still your bosses. You can't give them the lay down rules. The breeders are still the customers. You can't give them the lay down rules. You know, you can't do that. And from what we've agreed now, the breeders want something that suits them.
You know the law that says the customer is always right. You know? So it doesn't always work this way, but we need to get to a mutual agreement. That's why we've been also discussing that we need to sit down with the breeders, plan, okay, our entire work. We have to do this kind of collaborative work and exchange. If we do not get to a mutual agreement, then somebody has to eventually take over. But we have to, and we have to enforce that kind of culture within our working environment.
Or we must
Otherwise,
say someone must be responsible for the processing unit.
Absolutely, we need to have oversight.
Yes, I was wondering how it's going to be in our case, because we have a decentralized system that every breeding program, you have your processing facility, your store. So rice program has their processing facility, cassava, maize, are separate stores. So I'm wondering, what is the best way? For the machinery, I know we have a centralized system, but for the processing, we have decentralized system. And if you are going to centralize, the machine requirements also sometimes differ. Sometimes there are other machines you just need to change sieves. So how is it going to be, at least from those who have a centralized system, how is it going to help compared to the decentralized system that we currently have in most of the NAS? Thank you.
Gustavo, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think that it's not really in what we are saying on centralization. It's not really to have everything into the same building and one group managing everything. Not really that, but and can be that. It depends on, of course, the crop similarity. But much more than that is really the how to manage things. In the case of the national programs, maybe it would take more time, would be different steps, but it needs to move to that direction too. Otherwise, we have seen that it's the opportunity that to achieve a better result, a better data quality, or reduce the it's being reduced. No? So my recommendation on your case in Sari is sit with Amir can go and help, sit together. When we go to this, we have the plan to design the seed processing units for Tamale, for Kumasi, in case of the national programs in West Africa. So when Amir start designing that with you, so consider that, review what we have. So let's see and see who would be operating, and considering the specificities of different crops, what need to be considered or not. So can be and then evolve. So we don't need to think. Of course, we need to target the future, but we need to take step by step and say, okay, always thinking on the future without taking the next step will never go there. So let's go step by step, case by case, reviewing, and as I said, when designing the seed process unit, let's consider this how that would be more effective, how that will be managed. And of course, I understand the challenges on the funding process, but this is something that we need also to work close with the institution to manage that, see how that can be improved in terms of managing the operations. Yeah.
So one thing I like to highlight that Bruce talked about in his presentation is that you have these material experts, these people that can start to specialize in a specific role, etc. So seed processing basically all comes down to physics, right? You try to separate round from flat or big from small, etc., etc. And so when you develop a specialty around that, then you become very good. And so it doesn't matter if you're handling corn or beans or a small seed, because it's all based on the principles of physics. And you know, in many cases, you can even use the same equipment, right? But if you develop a specialty in doing something, and it doesn't mean you can't do anything else. I'm just saying that if you have ownership of a specialty, of a skill set like that, you really then can strive towards becoming better and making improvements and thinking about it, because it's part of who you are as a person. You own this activity, that's your specialty, and you're going to become recognized, and you can, as opposed to having to do 100 different things, trying to do them well, is very challenging. If you can specialize in doing just a few things very well, you have an opportunity for development, becoming much better. And I think and also just imagine that if we're trying to do that for every single breeding program, it's not feasible to support that, because then everybody would need a person that can handle seed equipment. Everybody needs to have a inventory manager for seed storage, and you multiply the number of people that you need with these specialties, which that's not sustainable. It just isn't. There is no funds for it. The funders would not go for that. The funders, one of the reasons that we agreed to support, for example, Alex's position here, is with the intention that we are going to see some centralization for certain activities. And certainly for specific crops, there are highly specialized roles. We recognize that. For many of the things that we're discussing here, like field preparation, field mechanization, equipment maintenance, etc., those things apply to all crops. Applies to plotmanships. It's a mindset. It's once you're good at plotmanship, you can go across crops. It's not just there are a few crop specific things that you need to pay attention to. But once you're attuned to a specialty, to a certain skill, you can transfer that to other crops. Okay, and so I think that is where we want to go. We really want to, we're not saying that the things you're doing here are bad, but we want to improve it. So that's a baseline. From here now, we want to increase it significantly. And that's why I think we're talking about, doing but as much centralization where it makes sense, doing the centralization, which applies, from my perspective, applies to seed processing, to seed storage, and then you don't run into so many problems. For example, with inventory management. If you just leave it up to the breeder, again, it's gonna happen when they have time, maybe, right?
Right.
And then it doesn't happen, and so things stack up, and shelves get full, and aisles get being full stacked of bags of seed. I've seen it. I've been there. Then I've contributed to it, unfortunately, but you know what I mean. So we really want to go to centralization as much as is feasibly possible, and where it's appropriate.
Please, Teresa.
Thank you very much. Actually, you mentioned some of the things that I have in mind. In centralizing seed units now, I think it's important to consider the peculiarities of tuber crops and the seed crop, and especially yam, which is totally different. The seed in yam is totally different from every other seed. When we talk about the botanical seed, they are small in quantity. They are not in bags. They are in small envelopes. I don't know about cassava, whether they also generate seeds in bags of 50 kg, which I know is not. So all these peculiarities, how it will come in, and how those seeds, those small seeds can actually fit into those ones that are generated in large quantity.
Good question. I don't know, Bruce, would you like to answer? Bruce, are you still with us? Yeah, you're muted.
I didn't quite understand the question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the question is, how can we accommodate the processing, okay, and for that matter, the packaging for RTD crops like cassavas, like yams?
Oh, wow. So those, yeah, gosh, I don't know. I didn't think about it. But that's
think of stacks, though, Bruce. Think
well,
of
that's true.
stacklings in sugar beet.
So yeah, okay. So we had the same thing. Thank you, Jan. So we had a situation that may be of interest to you in that because we get these frosts like we're having now, it kills these plants, our starts, if you will. So we would grow them in Arizona, but if you grow them in Arizona, the problem is that they don't vernalize. So we would bring them up, replant them in little pots, store them in potato sheds, and keep them at 4 degrees C for at least 40 days. So maybe along those lines, if that would help, that you would want to bring those in and find a way to store them. And I mean, listening to everything you guys are saying, I really don't understand. I'm having a hard time understanding why you wouldn't want to have a centralized warehouse or something, maybe multiple ones, that are experts in seed, or experts in storage at cold temperatures, because I would think your yams and your cassava would be stored at the same temperature as your seed. You'd be, you really can't store seed at too cold of a temperature. So I think it would work well.
That's one of the problems that actually SIP were trying to handle and tackle with their potato crops, for example. The storage of their potato seeds, they've been struggling with that because they would have to regenerate the breeding cycle in order to preserve their genetic material, instead of actually having a different season or an additional season of breeding. So using cold storage units, but again, this is challenging a bit for RTD crops because of the space management and the space allocation and the requirements for cold units.
Yeah, I would imagine that'd be the case, right?
Yeah, but the thing about centralization is actually we do want to establish centralized seed processing units. The issue is that at the current state we don't have that. Okay, but we're trying to work on it, at least to establish this kind of structure within the breeding centers.
If I could, when you're looking at that, I would like to warn you to be extremely careful with the temperatures when you're storing those types of products. We learned the very, very hard way where we would go, well, that's close enough. You know, 4 degrees, 5 degrees, what's the difference? You need to know there's a difference. And you start, we were storing them in buildings that didn't have controlled temperatures on them. And all of a sudden we'd get a blast of warm air coming through. Oh, that's all right. It won't hurt anything. We destroyed millions and millions of dollars of sales over a few years while we learned the hard way. That storage of those types of products is critical, and you don't want them to get warm and cold and warm. You want them to maintain. And it's really the organisms that grow on them that makes it the worst. So anyway.
Thanks, Bruce. On the subject of RTBs, keeping our RTB people happy. Okay, we would like to get more in the details of the planter that we've been working on.
Sure. So I have to be clever enough to share a file.
Bruce, I can share if you.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
Let me just open that here, or maybe Amir can share. I send that link to him.
Yeah, hold on.
Yeah, just Amir, if you can share, it would be easier. So just one background on that too. I mentioned during this, or I think it was Monday, that part of the component that we have the crop and hunger funds. We have basically things that have already been approved, and we are in the process. And part of that we still need to do some work. As part of what has already been approved, we have Bruce that he will present this planter solution for that would work for either for cassava and yam. We hope, of course, this is it's a prototype that we need to test, and he will present the concept and the status on how that is. We had many discussions with Alec, with Azrat, with Peter. So there are some people that helped us from not only from EiB-IITA, but also from other centers too, helping us to double check the specifications and design the proper equipment. It's not a new design. Bruce had already developed these machines before, it's not.
That's correct, right?
Yeah. So Bruce, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No. Well, so you're right. And so what happened is when Gustavo approached me about this project, it's a bit different, but it's the same sort of as the machines that I had already built. What was unique about this request is that you want to be able to plant cassava and yam and potatoes. And so I call these baskets because I can't come up with a more clever term than that. And you would actually place the yam, or I think on the next, well, anyway, inside of here, inside of those baskets. And then as they go around these, there we go, thank you. So you would put them inside of those, and then you can see these push rods with the kind of a, I don't know what color that is. And they were pushing the yams down. And so one of the challenges that is that you plant so deep, and so I had to make some changes to the planter to handle that. You want to be able to plant cassava, you want to be able to put it at an angle, and the cassava stem would stick out of the ground, I believe 5 centimeters or so. And you also wanted to be able to plant yams at a depth of 150 centimeters, is that right? Or anyway, 15 centimeters. Anyway, so that added a lot of challenge to it. And so I needed to make some changes, and that's what I'm doing right now. I have the metal is here now for the frame, and I'm in the process of putting it all together. With any luck, we'll be able to test this in the Imperial Valley towards the end of April. So, yeah.
So maybe, Amir, if you could share the photo from the frame, can give them it's in the mail, can give them the idea of the size of this equipment. Not this one, it is just in the mail. But anyway,
Okay.
You
So-
sent another one?
no, it's in the mail, not as attached, so you can read.
Yeah, 1 second.
So, as Bruce said, we hope to test these just preliminary tests in US, and from that, Bruce can, if needed, he will do some changes, and then we will ship this equipment to somewhere in to test that. Maybe it can be probably Nigeria can be a good place to test. So yeah, so this you can have an idea on the size of equipment, and yeah.
So I would like to point out one thing on here with this. And so what happens is that there's 4 baskets on the top as it goes around, which allows the employee to, one of the things that I always hated about planters, having sat on some of them, is that you have this tiny, tiny window of time to put whatever you're planting into the machine, or something happens, you might lose your finger or something. So on this one, you're able to put it in any one of 4. So that's makes it it's like a conveyor belt type planting. I think that's going to really help you out. They'll plant. You should be able to plant something every second if you wanted. So
Kind of a transplanter, the way that it works.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. The file? Yeah.
I mean, we can't hear.
Yeah, trying to share again, sorry, Gustavo, the PDF, the design. Okay, we have a question on the design, so 1 second there.
Yes, I think I heard that the machine is already calibrated with the help of the depth, the planting depth as a 12 centimeter. I'm trying to visualize what 12 centimeter will look like. Yeah, it's possible that the depth may be okay. Then how about the spacing calibrated also? Okay. Now the adjustment of the spacing, because when we are planting, we have different spacing for different trials. Some the smallest is a 0.25 centimeter up to 100 centimeter. That's 1 meter spacing. So I hope it's adjustable for this different spacing requirements for different trials.
So Gustavo, you see on the right-hand side, the holes that are in yeah. So you should be able to adjust this machine. I was going to make it adjustable by 25 centimeters, all the way from, I think the lowest I'm going to be able to go is about 12 centimeters, all the way up to, say, 5 centimeters above the ground. So you should be able to plant in 25 centimeter depths. Is that?
So the answer
sorry,
is
millimeters.
you will have some or alternatives or you would be able to adjust. Of course, with some limits, but you will be able to adjust. Yeah.
Yes, let me
This
say it
in the
again.
depth. No.
Yes, you can adapt. I'm sorry, I got my centimeters and millimeters. Us Americans. But anyway, you can adjust from 12 centimeters below to 5 centimeters above the ground in increments of 25 millimeters.
Okay.
In depth and in the spacing.
Yeah. But in increments of 2.5 centimeters per, right?
Depth.
Is that correct?
Depth. In the spacing, you have the chance to adjust, not to adjust, but to use or not some or basket and change these. Maybe you can explain better than I, Bruce, how
So
to the minimum distance and the maximum distance between plants.
So each basket will be 30 centimeters apart. And so it's up to you. You can plant every third, every one, so you really could plant 30, 60, or 90 centimeters. Do I have that right? Centimeters apart. Yeah.
Right.
So,
sorry, does it have like a gear selection mechanism where we can, alter spacing while moving on the ground?
So the way this works is that the ground speed and the machine, they have to be in unison, so that when this is pushing down, so this runs backwards to the tractor, right? So this is coming backwards, and so the speed at which that is on top of that soil where it's pushing will remain the same during the push. It's hard to explain, I guess, but if you want to plant,
It's like piercing. It's like the hand motion, however, just simulated on a machine where you're just dropping inside the soil in a cup form and just releasing.
That's right. Yep.
Right.
And so the thing is that you cannot adjust. In other words, if it's 30 centimeters, you couldn't go 25. I mean, you could, but it would take a lot of technology to make it run just a little bit faster at right time, for timing. But what was the other thing I was going to say to you? I forgot now. Okay.
On the variable distancing with gear selection?
You don't really have gear selection as such. So what will happen is if the tractor is going faster, for example, there's a RPM meter on the machine and an RPM meter on the ground, and you want the machine and the ground to be in sync. Now you may choose to have the ground speed be slightly faster, because my understanding is that you want to solve it at an angle. So if you're pushing down and the plant speed is a little bit faster, planter speed is a little bit faster than the tractor speed. No, the tractor speed is a little faster than the planter, then it will actually plant it at an angle. Sorry, I got you.
All right.
Yeah. Please, one more question, please. The shapes are not uniform. We have different shapes, and I want to ask about the calibration for shapes. And some tubers are whole tubers, some are cut tubers. Are all these into consideration in the calibration for the machine?
So you don't have to worry about that part, because I can plant, this machine will plant anything from say a baseball size, a cricket ball. It'll plant a small, these little tiny carrots you buy at the grocery store, they'll plant that, and they'll plant a cassava stem without any adjustment. You just push it in and they'll plant it. The only thing is that there is a size limitation on how big the diameter of the crop is that you're planting.
So maybe let me try to help too. Teresa, this is also the reason why we need to test. and we need to test, to send to you, and understand some opportunities to improve, because commercial planters would be even more difficult to maybe you can find one commercial transplanter that can work for yam, but maybe it would not work for cassava, and then would work for one or demand, but not for others. So that's why we liked this one, because it's not that much expensive. It's a simple machine, easy to maintain. That doesn't require that much technology in terms of automation, whatever, and we can easily test and improve from that. We can, of course, I'm pretty sure that opportunities you will find some. You will say, hey, maybe it would be better to do this instead of that. Then we can think on how to do that. But it's we don't want to really what I'm trying to say is we need to go step by step again. So let's test, or prove that the concept work, and then improve, and then we can share, we can discuss again. So all this, the distances, etc., were considered based on the requirement. As I said, ASRAT sent the requirement for EM, and when it was not possible, we informed they probably this won't be possible. For instance, initially we were thinking on sweet potato too, but then we realized that material that sweet potato would plant, it was not really possible to plant with that, and then sweet potato would not be okay using this machine. But anyway, the idea here is just to present that to you. Once I take advantage that Bruce is here, and showing progress on that too, then we can maybe in the near future we can show more result and agree on the next step with you too. Okay.
Thanks, Gustavo. Gabriel, you had a comment?
Yes, thanks, Bruce, for your presentation, and thanks for the initiative for this design. So I believe root and tuber crops, they actually like expression in the soil. So they want EIBs, if possible, instead of ridges. Because I could remember sometimes in Abuja station, Dr. Astrat was asking me if it's possible for him to get 40 cm depth from a 40? Yeah, 40 cm depth from this region. So now, if you're planting with this machine, are these parameters put in place just for the EIBs alone before the planting? So these are the aspects that I want to put out. Then again, looking at our own climatic conditions, quite different over there. Are these parameters also put in place in this machine design?
What's the condition that you're facing of different climatic conditions?
No, there are some machines that you import from the US, take for example, and by the time they get to African soil, they won't give you the optimal performance due to the soil type difference. So that's just my own opinion.
Okay. Yeah, Bruce, you want to handle that?
Yeah, it's a good point, and it's obviously something that I don't know the soil there, and I know soil is different everywhere. So we're trying our best to make it as universal as possible. And yeah, I would say to you that when this machine was designed, which has been in the works now for 5 or 6 years and tested, that we tried to consider all of those, but you raise a good point. I just, until we get it there and test it, I guess I don't.
Like you and Gustavo said, that it remains to be seen. Things need to be tested for us to make sure of the application, and maybe afterwards we can do some adjustments on that. So in that, I believe we're at the hour and we'll be closing the session on seed processing. So would like to thank you, Bruce, for your inputs, your insights, and all the support that you're giving. And would like to also thank all attending online and here physically for this wonderful session. So thanks again.
Yes, if I could, oh, you're welcome. If I could just make 2 comments on the way out. One is, I said when I started this, it takes passion. I heard the passion. That was very heartwarming, very good. And the best of all, I actually heard a plant breeder tell the truth about keeping seeds. So that was wonderful. Thank you.
That was one plant breeder who actually. Oh.
Okay, fair enough.
Fair
Thank you,
enough.
bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Bruce.
Oh, Teresa, you want to? Oh, you're clapping, or is that a comment?
Oh, I'm done. Thank you.
I'm clapping.
Oh,
Okay,
thank you.
great. Thanks.
Good try. Good job.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot.